Hello, welcome for a new video on the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Today we will see two verses about the same topic started in the last video, a series of verses about bliss. The first one is verse 66. Om kuhanena prayogeṇa sadya mṛgekṣaṇe samudeti mahānando yena tattvaṃ prakāśate. Mṛgekṣaṇe, you who have eyes like a gazelle. So Shiva is speaking to the goddess Devi. Mahānanda, the complete bliss, infinite bliss, the bliss that contains within itself all other blisses. Samudeti arises completely. Sadya eva, instantly, right on the spot. How? Prayogeṇa, through the practice, kuhanena, of kuhana. So this is where it becomes slightly more obscure, because what this kuhana is not absolutely clear. According to both the commentaries, kuhana would mean a magic trick, like a sleight of hand, a magic trick. So the great bliss arising here would be the great wonder you experience when you see a magic trick. A magic trick, by definition, is astonishing, is a cause for wonderment, and consciousness is bliss, is wonderment, chamatkara. Like what you feel in front of a phenomenon that looks like a miracle, like the rabbit coming out of the hat, something surprising, abnormal, unusual, unexpected, that doesn't seem to obey laws of nature, or at least our habits. So through the practice of magic, you can see, for instance, street magic is very good at that. There is instantly a feeling of amazement, of wonder. And through that, a great joy, a great bliss arises, a surprising bliss, the bliss of being surprised. Yena, and through that experience of the bliss of being amazed, astonished, tattvaṃ, being, prakāśate, shines, being shines, the full light of consciousness displays herself. So we get in a state of consciousness expansion, of full consciousness. Being shines in full. tat kshanameva bhavet, right on the spot, in that very moment. Nirvikalpa, and that state of full awareness, is defined by the commentator as nirvikalpa avastha, a state of undivided attention. Pure awareness means undivided attention, not necessarily without content, but without attention being focused on this or that content. Awareness remains wide open. Abhinavagupta gives the example of seeing a city from the top of a hill. You have a general view of the city, and your gaze remains open. Even though it can focus on this or that detail, it remains open on the whole of the city, the whole picture. So this is what nirvikalpa awareness is. There can be movement, there can be contents, but things, objects, but awareness remains wide open. Even though it moves, it does not get caught into this or that particular thing. So here we have magic shows, magic tricks as a mean of awakening. Second verse, 67. Om sarvasrotonibandhena prāṇaśaktyordhvayā śanaiḥ pipīlasparśavelāyām prathate paramaṃ sukham. Here we are told about a mysterious feeling of an ant sprawling on your skin, like a subtle feeling, tactile feeling. So, how? Prāṇaśaktyordhvayā śanaiḥ, through the energy of the vital breath, or the energy of life, vital energy, if you will, prāṇaśakti, urdhvayā śanaiḥ, going slowly upward. And how does that energy go slowly upward? Sarvasrotonibandhena, by blocking, by checking the flow, all the flows, literally, by checking, by stopping all the flows. The flows of what? The flows of the five senses. Shrotra, chakshunasa, mukha, guhya upastha, randhra, nirodhena, by blocking the ears, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the anus, the genital organs, and the fontanelle, randhra. And if one does that, we don't know exactly how, vital energy, that is again attention, which is the main topic, the main object of all those practices. Practices like that, meditation practices, are practices of attention. So here attention, labeled prāṇaśakti, vital energy, is prevented from following its natural course. from flowing outside. What is probably meant is that attention turns around upon herself, and in that way it is somehow stopped, that is, stopped from her natural course. Attention usually is extroverted, going outward, aiming at outside objects or even inside objects in the mind. Those objects of the mind are also outside in relation to awareness. Everything that is not awareness is outside of awareness in the sense that it is different from awareness, that it is not awareness, even though it does not exist separately from awareness. So we turn attention upon herself, back on herself, and then one feels like the subtle sprawling of an ant on the skin. You see, something quite subtle. The feeling of the skin. And then prathate will manifest, will spread, sukham, the happiness, the pleasure, paramaṃ, supreme. Supreme pleasure will spread. So here the practice is of turning upon herself attention, preventing her from just naturally, spontaneously flowing outside as usual. But turning upon herself here means most probably turning upon the sensation of the skin, tactile sensation. Instead of being just aware of visual things and sounds, as we are most often aware, we project our attention on the skin, that is, on the tactile field. Sparshaha, sparshaha, the tactile field. Sparshaha janmagradi sakashat, mula kandadi sthana sparsha. So here he says it is the feeling of the different subtle places of the subtle body, like the anal zone, the genital zone, the place just around the navel, the so-called hara, which is here called kanda, the bulb, and we feel we feel those places, we feel the energy spreading in those places, that is, relaxing in those places, relaxing and contracting, and thus expanding. Those places of the subtle body are, as you know, described as chakra wheels or padma lotuses, but they are also, not all of them, but several of them, described as granthi, knots, because there is contraction, like contraction in the trunk, in the different parts of the trunk, from the lowest places in the genitals to the throat, even to the neck, etc. So we just relax that into the tactile sensation. And that tactile sensation, sparsha, touch, sensation of the skin, plays a very important and special role in tantric yoga. Because usually it is said that the five senses can be a hindrance to awakening. Why? Because they divert attention from awareness herself, wide open and naked. But there is an exception for touch, because touch is said to be much nearer to awareness, to consciousness. Consciousness herself is a kind of touch. So if I put my attention to the tactile sensations, to the feelings of touch in space, it will carry my attention naturally back to awareness, to wide open awareness. It will open that contracted, fragmented attention back to wide open awareness. That's very interesting because usually in most cultures and traditions, seeing is considered the highest of the five senses and the most akin to the mind and the higher parts of the individual. But here in tantric yoga, touch is considered very special. So putting our attention on the tactile sensation is very important. Another possibility would be that this verse speaks about sexual practice. You know that tantric yoga is famous for its practice of sexual union as a form of yoga, as a mean to spiritual awakening. And that seems to be quite possible because, for two reasons, I would see two arguments. First, that verse 67 is just before several verses dealing explicitly with sexual experience. The verses 68, 69, and 70. So that would speak of sexual union, and that prāṇaśaktyordhvayā, that vital energy rising upward, would be an allusion, would allude to the practice of the retention of the sexual fluids, which is not very, it seems not very common in tantric Shaiva yogas. It's more a Buddhist thing, which then has been transferred into the Hatha yoga tradition and the Natha tradition. But it's not altogether impossible that we find a trace of it here. Some older tantras, maybe it's not 100% sure, it's not 100% clear, but some older tantras, like the Pichumata Brahmayamala, seem maybe to teach a kind of sexual continence that they call avagraha, so sexual union together with sexual continence. And so that would be here the nibandhena, the blocking, the stopping, sarvasrotas, all the flows. So here the flow would also mean the natural flow of the sexual fluids going outside towards orgasm. So here it would mean some kind of retention, some kind of continence. But it can be also the practice of just turning around attention together with that practice of sexual retention. Anyway, the practice of checking vital energy is taught together with the practice of sexual union in the chapter 6 of Tantra Loka by Abhinavagupta. So if you want to have more details about that, so in other words, the practice of paying a very, very intense and refined and detailed attention to what happens during sexual union, and the practice of paying very, very intense and detailed attention to the process of breathing and the processes of sensory attention are taught together in chapter 6 of Tantra Loka because they are very much related practices. The practice of breath is from the heart to the end of the 12s above the head, and the practice of sexual union is from the heart to the lower end of the 12s, the Kula Padma, below the sexual organs. But both practices are kind of symmetrical, starting and going back to the heart center, which is the heart of the subtle body. And here the commentator Shivopadhyaya gives us a detailed commentary, and he takes a pranayama approach, a breath practice approach. So he speaks of the details of the pranayama here, and of measuring the space of the breath going out, and the time, counting the breath, and so on. And those details, you can find them in French in my translation of that commentary, or you can find them in the translation of the chapter 6 and its commentary by Jayaratha. I have translated that in French. It's not published yet, but anyway, the two greatest scholars of tantric Shaivism are said to work on publishing sooner or later a translation of the Tantra Loka, Mark Ditchkovsky and Alexis Sanderson, and they are the two best scholars in the field. So I think it will be very interesting to read their comments and explanations and translation of that chapter, because it's very interesting. And anyway, it shows us also once again that the breath practice of listening to the breath, examining, observing the breath, plunging with one's whole attention into the breath cycles is really the core practice of tantric yoga, and especially of Kaula yoga, the more esoteric traditions within tantricism. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention, and have a good day, and see you next time.